It was a quiet morning in the small suburban neighborhood. Birds were singing, and the sun was slowly rising over the neatly lined houses. The streets were clean, the lawns were green, and everything looked peaceful. In the middle of this calm neighborhood lived Alex, a young man who loved his home and his garage full of tools, gadgets, and memories. Alex's house was perfect for him. The garage was his favorite place. It was not just a garage, it was where he worked on his small projects, fixed old furniture, and spent hours tinkering with machines. He enjoyed the quiet mornings there, listening to soft music while sipping coffee. Life seemed simple and happy. But not everyone in the neighborhood was as calm and friendly as Alex. There was Karen, the HOA president, and everyone secretly called her HOA Karen. She had sharp eyes, a loud voice, and a habit of finding problems where there were none. She walked the streets with a clipboard, always looking for something to complain about. At first, Karen seemed harmless. She smiled politely at neighbors and waved when she passed. But Alex had heard the stories. She had complained about a tree that wasn't straight, a mailbox that was too colorful, and even about a neighbor's small garden gnome. Everyone knew that if Karen noticed something, trouble would follow. Alex tried to ignore her. He followed the rules carefully. His lawn was always mowed, the trash bins were hidden, and the driveway was spotless. Still, he could feel Karen's eyes on his property almost every day. It made him uncomfortable. He didn't like confrontation, and he especially didn't like arguments with someone as stubborn as Karen. One afternoon, Alex was in his garage, fixing an old bicycle. He heard footsteps approaching. He looked up and saw Karen standing at the edge of his driveway, clipboard in hand. Her sharp eyes scanned the garage, the driveway, and even the small flower pots by the door. "Good afternoon, Alex," she said, her voice polite but firm. "I just wanted to remind you about the HOA rules regarding garage organization. Everything needs to be tidy and nothing should be stored outside. You understand, right?" Alex smiled politely. "Of course, Karen. Everything is fine. I keep my garage organized." Karen nodded slowly, but her eyes stayed on the garage. Alex noticed the way her lips pressed together. There was something in her look that made him uneasy. Something like a warning. After she left, Alex went back to his workbench, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was watching him more closely than before. He tried to focus on his project, but every little sound outside made him jump. He kept thinking about Karen and her clipboard, walking around the neighborhood like a detective. Days passed, and Alex noticed small things that were different. The tire swing in his backyard seemed to have moved slightly. The garden hose was not exactly where he left it. At first, he thought he was imagining things. But the feeling of being watched never went away. He even started noticing Karen's car parked at the corner of the street more often. She never waved or smiled. She just sat there, sometimes reading papers, sometimes staring at the houses. It was unnerving, but Alex told himself to stay calm. He had done nothing wrong. One evening, as the sun was setting, Alex decided to take a walk around his property. He checked every corner of the garage, every lock, and every tool. Everything was in place. Everything was fine. Yet, he could not shake the thought that something was coming. Something bad. Karen's presence in the neighborhood was growing stronger. She was not just the HOA president, she was becoming the kind of neighbor who could control the peace of everyone on the street. And Alex realized that no matter how careful he was, Karen seemed to find a reason to interfere. That night, Alex sat in his garage with the lights dimmed, listening to the soft hum of his tools. He tried to relax, but his mind kept replaying the moments with Karen. The polite warnings, the sharp looks, and the constant feeling of being watched. Something inside him whispered, "This calm will not last. Trouble is coming." Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful. The moon shone softly, and the trees swayed in the night breeze. But Alex knew that peace was only a mask. Behind the friendly lawns and quiet streets, something dark was stirring. And that something had a name, Karen. As he turned off the garage light and went inside, he could not have imagined what was waiting for him. The storm had not yet arrived, but its first signs were already there. And soon, Alex's life, his garage, and his sense of safety would be turned upside down. The calm before the storm was ending. And when the storm hit, nothing would ever be the same. It started with a sound that Alex could not ignore, a soft scratching at the garage door late one night. He woke up to the noise, heart racing, and stepped outside in the dark. The street was empty. The moonlight reflected off the wet pavement from a light drizzle earlier. Nothing seemed out of place. But Alex knew better. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a stray animal. It was deliberate. Someone was watching. The next morning, he found a small, folded note pinned under a rock on his driveway. The words were neat, almost too neat. Your garage is a mess. Fix it, or the HOA will take action. Alex frowned. The garage was clean. He had just organized it the day before. But the handwriting left no doubt it was Karen. Her obsession had moved from casual warnings to something more personal, almost sinister. For the next few days, strange things began happening. A small tool was missing from his workbench. The garden hose was bent at an odd angle. He even found footprints in the dirt near his garage door, small, precise, like someone had been pacing. Alex started to feel nervous in his own home. The garage, once his safe place, now felt like a trap. Then came the call. Karen's voice was on the phone, sweet but sharp. Alex, I noticed a few things in your garage. Some items are not in compliance with HOA rules. Please fix it immediately, or I will have no choice but to report it. Alex tried to stay calm. He explained politely that everything was in order. She didn't listen. Her voice remained firm, almost mocking, as if she enjoyed the argument more than the rules themselves. By now, Alex realized something. Karen didn't just want rules followed. She wanted control. She wanted him to feel small, anxious, and trapped. Every interaction left him more uneasy than the last. One evening, Alex's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, came over. She had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years and had dealt with Karen before. She whispered to Alex, glancing nervously down the street. Karen is not normal. She starts with small complaints, then she escalates. You have to be careful, she doesn't stop until she gets what she wants. Alex nodded but felt a cold chill run down his spine. He thought of the note, the footprints, and the late-night scratching. Karen wasn't just following rules. She was hunting him. The tension reached its peak one Saturday afternoon. Alex was working in the garage, focused on a small woodworking project. He didn't hear her coming until he saw her shadow through the window. Karen was standing on the edge of his driveway, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning every corner of the garage. Alex, she said sweetly, I've noticed your garage door paint is slightly chipped. And these boxes here, they are not allowed. Please remove them immediately. Alex's jaw tightened. He had painted the door last month. The boxes were stacked neatly. But Karen didn't care. Her eyes were sharp, cold, and judgmental. Karen, it's fine. Everything is fine, Alex replied, trying to keep his voice calm. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I will be checking again soon. Make sure it is perfect, she said and walked away, clipboard in hand, leaving Alex feeling like he was under a microscope. That night, Alex stayed in the garage later than usual, checking and rechecking everything. The tools were lined up perfectly. The boxes were stacked just so. He even measured the distance between each item to make sure it matched the HOA rules exactly. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on him. Something was changing. Karen was no longer just a strict neighbor or a picky HOA president. She was crossing a line. The little warnings, the notes, and the calls were just the beginning. Alex could feel it in his bones, this was about to escalate into something dangerous. As he turned off the lights and locked the garage, he whispered to himself, this can't go on, but what can I do? She's everywhere. Outside, the night was still and quiet, but Alex knew better. Karen was watching, waiting, planning her next move. And this time, he felt certain whatever she had in mind would not stay small. The calm was over. The first conflict had begun. The first sign that things were getting worse came in the middle of the night. Alex was asleep when a loud clang echoed from the garage. His heart jumped. This time, it wasn't a small sound. It was deliberate, heavy, and sharp. He grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the garage. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a chilling sight. The front of the garage was untouched, but a few of his tools had been moved, scattered on the floor. One of the boxes he had stacked neatly earlier had been knocked over. It wasn't random, someone had been inside. Alex froze. There was no sign of forced entry. The lock was intact. Whoever had done this knew exactly how to get in without leaving a trace. And he knew, without a doubt, who it was: Karen. The next morning, the neighborhood seemed normal again. Birds sang, neighbors watered their lawns, and the sun shone on the quiet streets. But for Alex, nothing felt normal. The garage, his safe place, now felt vulnerable. The creeping fear from the past weeks had grown into a knot of dread he could not shake. Karen didn't waste any time. That afternoon, Alex noticed her car parked suspiciously at the end of his street. She wasn't just glancing at houses anymore, she was staring directly at his garage. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. She didn't move until he looked outside, and then she smiled, slow and cold, as if she had won some invisible battle. Over the next few days, small but alarming things began to happen. His garden hose was mysteriously tangled every morning. Tools were missing for hours, only to appear in odd places. A lock on the side door of the garage seemed to jiggle, though nothing was broken. Every small disturbance made Alex's stomach tighten. He realized Karen was no longer just being a nuisance, she was sending a message: "This is my territory, and you are under my control." One afternoon, Alex decided to confront her directly. He walked to her house, trying to remain calm. Karen answered the door almost immediately, clipboard in hand, like a hawk spotting prey. "Alex, I noticed your driveway is slightly uneven," she said, her voice calm, almost sweet. "It could be dangerous. I'd hate for someone to trip. You should fix it soon." Alex clenched his fists. "Karen, I fix things as needed. The driveway is fine. You're taking this too far." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am just following the rules. But I see you understand." "Good." Alex left, feeling both frustrated and fearful. Her words were calm, but her presence was threatening. He realized she enjoyed this, watching him squirm, making him doubt his own safety. The next night, Alex barely slept. He stayed up in the garage, listening to every creak of the house, every rustle outside. Then he saw it, shadows moving near the driveway. He froze, holding his breath. The shapes were faint, but they moved deliberately, circling the garage. He didn't know what to do. Calling the police seemed excessive. What evidence could he show? Karen had not touched anything illegal yet. But it was clear, she was escalating. Each day, she was becoming bolder. By morning, Alex felt drained and trapped. He realized that Karen's obsession wasn't about rules anymore. It was personal. She had decided that his garage, his space, was now her target. And there was no stopping her. That afternoon, he looked around the neighborhood. Other houses seemed safe, peaceful. But his garage felt like a fortress under siege. Karen had turned the calm streets into a place of tension. Every glance from a neighbor could be a warning. Every small sound outside could be her. Alex didn't know how far she would go. The fear was growing, and he could feel it pressing on him like a storm cloud. He could almost hear her voice in the wind: "Everything must be perfect, or else." He locked the garage carefully, double-checked the doors, and stood still for a moment, staring at the dark shadows in his yard. He knew one thing for certain: this was no longer just a battle of rules. Karen's obsession was dangerous. And the real storm hadn't even started yet. The night was unusually quiet. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows across the driveway. Alex was in his garage, working on a small project, trying to calm his racing mind. The recent days had been tense, with Karen watching and interfering, but tonight felt different, like the calm before a storm. Then he smelled it. A faint, acrid smell, like smoke. At first, he thought it was a neighbor burning trash. But the smell grew stronger. He froze, sniffing the air. It wasn't coming from anywhere else, it was coming from his garage. Panic shot through him. Alex ran outside and saw it, flames flickering at the edge of the garage door. His heart pounded. The fire was small but growing quickly. He grabbed the hose and tried to fight it, but the fire seemed to spread faster than he could control. He called 911, his hands shaking. The operator's calm voice barely registered. Neighbors began to notice, coming out of their houses, their faces painted with shock. Among them, Alex saw Karen, standing at the corner of the street, her expression unreadable. She didn't run toward the fire or call for help. She just stood there, watching, almost satisfied. The fire department arrived quickly. Water sprayed everywhere, hissing and steaming as the flames fought back. Alex watched helplessly as his garage, the place where he spent hours creating, repairing, and dreaming, was engulfed in smoke and fire. Even after the fire was out, the damage was clear. Charred wood, melted plastic, and ruined tools covered the floor. The smell of smoke lingered like a reminder of what had just happened. Alex felt a mixture of anger, fear, and disbelief. How could someone do this? Who could be so cruel? Karen's presence at the scene made it worse. When the neighbors whispered about the fire, she nodded politely, saying, "Such accidents happen all the time." Sad, really. But there was something in her eyes, a spark of something Alex couldn't describe. It chilled him to the bone. That night, Alex sat in what was left of his garage, trying to process what had happened. The fire had been sudden, destructive, and deliberate. He didn't know how or why, but he knew this: Karen had crossed a line. She was no longer just a meddlesome neighbor, she was dangerous. He went inside and locked the door, checking every window, every lock. He felt vulnerable in his own home. The garage, once his sanctuary, had been violated. And he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. As he lay in bed that night, Alex's mind raced. What could Karen do next? The fire was a warning, a statement. She wanted him afraid, controlled, powerless. And for the first time, Alex realized that dealing with her would not be simple. He needed help, but even the laws seemed distant and slow. The night dragged on, filled with uneasy silence. Outside, the neighborhood returned to its normal quiet, but for Alex, everything had changed. Karen had made her move, and the shadow of what she could do next hung over him like a dark cloud. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the charred remains of his garage. He remembered all the hours he had spent there, all the memories attached to that space. And now, it was gone, or at least, it felt that way. Alex knew one thing: he couldn't ignore Karen anymore. She wasn't just a problem, she was a threat. And the next steps he took would decide whether she could take everything else from him or if he would finally stand up to her. The fire was only the beginning. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous energy. Alex sat in the hard chair, hands gripping the edge of the table. He could hear the faint shuffle of papers, the whispers of neighbors, and the low murmur of people settling in. Across the room, Karen sat with her clipboard, pretending to be calm, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. Alex took a deep breath. This was the moment that could decide everything. The fire that had destroyed his garage, the months of fear and intimidation, all of it would finally be addressed in front of a judge. The judge entered. Silence fell instantly. Her robe swished as she walked to her seat, and her eyes scanned the room, sharp and unyielding. Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. He had read about judges handling cases like this, but nothing prepared him for the weight of the room, the reality of someone holding the power to give him justice or deny it. Karen was the first to speak. Her voice was polite, almost sweet, but there was a cold edge underneath. She described herself as the victim, claiming that Alex had been negligent, leaving tools outside, creating hazards, and even suggesting that the fire might have been an accident. Her words were rehearsed, smooth, designed to make her look reasonable and him look careless. Alex felt his stomach tighten, but he knew the truth. He had evidence, photos, receipts, witness statements, even the 911 call from the night of the fire. He handed them to his lawyer, who placed them neatly on the table. When it was Alex's turn to speak, he kept his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor," he began, "I have lived in this neighborhood for years. I have always followed the rules. The fire in my garage was not an accident. I have evidence that shows someone intentionally started it." The room went silent. Karen's smile faltered for a moment, though she quickly covered it with a polite nod. The judge leaned forward, examining the papers, reading carefully. Alex felt the seconds stretch into eternity. Witnesses spoke, neighbors who had seen Karen near the garage, the fire department official who responded that night, and even Mrs. Thompson, who recounted Karen's history of obsession and harassment. Each statement painted a picture of Karen not as a concerned HOA president, but as a woman obsessed with control, willing to cross lines. Karen's confident facade began to crack. She fumbled with her notes, her voice shaking slightly as she tried to argue her way out of the situation. Alex could see the fear building in her eyes, the first real crack in her armor. Hours passed like minutes. Alex's lawyer made the case clear: the fire was deliberate, the intimidation continuous, and Karen had overstepped the boundaries of the HOA. The judge listened quietly, taking notes, occasionally glancing at Karen, who now looked smaller under the weight of the evidence. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the judge spoke. Her voice was calm but firm. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, it is clear that the actions taken against Mr. Alex were deliberate and unlawful. The court rules in favor of Mr. Alex." Karen's face went pale. Her lips parted in shock. She stared at the judge, blinking rapidly, unable to process the words. She had been so sure she could intimidate Alex, manipulate the system, and get away with it, but she hadn't counted on the truth being so clear. Alex felt a wave of relief. Months of fear, stress, and sleepless nights were finally starting to lift. Justice had been served, and Karen could no longer control him. As the courtroom emptied, Alex walked past Karen, who avoided his eyes. The neighbors whispered quietly, some nodding in respect, others shaking their heads in disbelief at her actions. Outside, the sun shone brightly, a sharp contrast to the tense morning inside the courtroom. Alex took a deep breath. The battle had been hard, frightening, and exhausting, but he had won. Karen had learned a hard lesson: intimidation and obsession could only go so far. And for the first time in months, Alex felt free to live without fear. But even as he walked away, he couldn't forget the months of tension, the fire, the notes, and the staring eyes. He knew that standing up for himself had been the only way to end it, and that some neighbors would never change. The courtroom was silent now, but the echoes of the battle would remain forever. Karen sat in her car outside the courthouse, gripping her clipboard like a lifeline. She had spent weeks preparing, rehearsing every line, predicting every argument. She had been certain she would win, certain that Alex would bend under pressure. But she hadn't counted on this. The judge's words still echoed in her mind: the court rules in favor of Mr. Alex. Her heart raced. Her confident smile had vanished, replaced by a frozen stare. She had been so sure, so controlling, so untouchable, and now, for the first time in years, she felt powerless. She tried to replay the situation in her mind. Maybe it had been a mistake? Maybe the judge hadn't understood something? But deep down, she knew the truth. The evidence was undeniable. Photos, witness statements, fire reports, it all pointed to her. Karen's face flushed. Her lips trembled. She had always believed that her position in the HOA gave her power over everyone. She thought rules could justify anything she did. But now, she realized just how wrong she had been. The courtroom had stripped her of that power, exposing her obsession and cruelty for all to see. Meanwhile, Alex was walking out of the courthouse with his lawyer, calm but victorious. Neighbors nodded and whispered in admiration, many having followed the trial closely. Alex didn't glance at Karen. He didn't need to. The victory itself was enough. Justice had been served. Back in her car, Karen tried to compose herself. She pressed her fingers to her face, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. Every glance from the neighbors who had been inside the courtroom felt like a punch. The whispers, the stares, the nods of support for Alex, they all reminded her of her failure. Karen's mind raced with anger and disbelief. How could this happen? She thought. I followed the rules. I was protecting the neighborhood. But even she couldn't deny it, she had crossed a line, and now the law had confirmed it. The reality hit her fully when she saw the fire report and witness statements posted online by local news and shared among neighborhood groups. Everyone now knew her obsession, her intimidation, her attempt to control Alex, they all had been exposed. Her shock turned to humiliation. She had imagined her victory in the courthouse hundreds of times, but the truth was harsher than anything she could have feared. Karen had never been powerless before. She had never faced consequences like this. And now, she would have to. Alex, on the other hand, felt a quiet sense of relief. He had faced months of fear, harassment, and intimidation, but he had never lost his composure. Justice was not just about winning in court, it was about standing up, staying calm, and letting the truth speak for itself. As Karen drove away, still shaking from the shock, Alex began to think about the future. He knew he would rebuild his garage, restore his space, and move forward. The victory had not just been legal, it was personal. He had taken back control of his life from someone who had tried to dominate it. Karen's shock, her humiliation, and her defeat were complete. The HOA president who had ruled through fear had finally met her match. And Alex knew that some lessons, no matter how harsh, had to be learned the hard way. The storm was over. The air felt lighter, calmer, freer. But the memory of the battle, and the shock in Karen's eyes, would remain etched in Alex's mind forever. The morning sun rose slowly over the neighborhood, casting a warm glow over the streets Alex had once walked with unease. The fire was gone. The charred smell lingered in the garage, but it was fading. Alex stood outside, looking at the damage and imagining how he would rebuild. Each ruined tool and scorched board reminded him of the battle he had endured and survived. Neighbors passed by, some offering quiet words of support. Mrs. Thompson waved from across the street, smiling with relief. She had seen the intimidation, the obsessive notes, the late-night stares. Now, finally, there was peace. Karen was gone. Not physically, of course, she still lived in the neighborhood, but her presence had changed. The HOA president who had ruled through fear and obsession had been humbled. Her power over others had vanished with the court ruling, and her attempts to control Alex had been exposed for everyone to see. Alex walked into his garage and ran his hands over the workbench. It was damaged, but not destroyed. Tools could be replaced. Boards could be repaired. More importantly, his sense of security could be restored. He realized something important: the battle had been about more than property or rules. It had been about standing up for himself, refusing to be intimidated, and reclaiming his life. He thought about the months of tension, the nights of fear, the notes, the scratches, and the fire. It had all felt overwhelming at times. But every challenge, every scare, had taught him resilience. He had learned that staying calm, gathering evidence, and standing firm could defeat even the most relentless opponent. The neighborhood, too, was different now. People whispered less, walked taller, and treated each other with more care. Alex could feel the subtle shift in the air. Karen's obsession had cast a shadow, but that shadow had lifted. As Alex began to clean and organize his garage, he smiled quietly. Life was returning to normal, but he knew he would never take calm for granted again. He had faced fear, danger, and intimidation, and he had come out stronger. From the street, Karen watched him, her expression a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and quiet shame. She had learned the hard way that rules and obsession could not replace respect and humanity. Her attempts to control others had failed, and the lesson was permanent. Alex finished arranging the last of his tools and stepped back. The garage looked almost as it had before, but this time, it felt stronger, safer not just in structure, but in spirit. He knew that whatever challenges came next, he would face them with confidence, because he had survived the worst neighbor anyone could imagine. The sun climbed higher, filling the streets with light. For the first time in months, Alex felt truly free. The fire, the fear, the courtroom battles, they were behind him now. What remained was life, rebuilt stronger, and a story of resilience that would stay with him forever. Some neighbors would never change. Some problems would always exist. But Alex had learned the most important lesson: courage, patience, and determination could overcome even the most relentless storm. And as he looked around his peaceful street, he whispered to himself, with a faint smile, "No one will ever take my peace again."